Richard Black, a former United States Marine and government official representing the state of Virginia.
The illusion of Russian and Chinese aggression around the world. You'll hear this repeated many, many times. China's taking over the world, they're doing all this stuff. We've created this bizarre illusion because the war industrial complex must have enemies. You cannot manufacture weapons when you don't have enemies.
And this is the unfortunate thing about the United States economy. It largely depends on the military-industrial complex and spending money on wars and international conflicts around the world.
And so we create this illusion that they're coming to get us, they're on our doorstep. And the fact of the matter is that China is out to make a buck. They want money. The Belt and Road Initiative is very important, but they have a different paradigm.
If you've ever done business with Chinese people, you'll know that they're very savvy, they're very business smart, and again, Chinese people don't let political differences get in the way.
Our paradigm is we go into a country, we set up NGOs, we take over the government by coup. If we can't, then we just bomb the place to smithereens half the time.
Given the United States track record, this is why China and many other countries around the world are actually very fearful and skeptical whenever the United States gets involved in a project. Are you genuinely wanting to help the people in this country, or are you more interested in actually changing the government and installing a government that better suits United States interests?
And you compare that with the foreign policy of China, which is you go in, you work with whatever government is there, you're not judgmental, but you make hard business decisions, you make investments. And I think for people who are comparing the foreign aid paradigm of the U.S. and China, they're saying my likelihood of surviving is much higher if I follow the Chinese paradigm.
To give you a better perspective of this, let's travel to South America, and I'm going to show you a clip from John Perkins. Mr. Perkins is a famous author of the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and in this book he exposes how the United States government traveled around the world and convinced smaller, developing nations to take substantial loans that were in the best interest of the United States government.
But what China has done differently than the United States, and I asked my friends in high places in some of the Latin American countries, why are you taking loans from China? Don't you think that they're going to do the same thing? That's how we'd much rather take loans from China than the United States. And I'd say, but wait, aren't they after your resources too? And they say, yeah, they're after our resources. We don't have the technology to mine, to drill for oil, to do these things. So we need outside country to help us. And we know that the United States has a record of overthrowing our governments and assassinating leaders. We all know that. And of building military bases on our soil. And of forcing us to vote against Cuba at the United Nations, doing things, exercising huge controls over us. And China hasn't done that. China's not built any military bases here. They've not taken out any of our presidents. They've not done all of any coups. And so we prefer to take loans from them.
One of the stories that many of us are familiar with is China's efforts in developing the continent of Africa. I'm sure many of you have seen these viral thumbnails on YouTube that portray the continent of Africa with a red Chinese flag and want you to believe that China is trying to enslave the entire continent of Africa.
Been very concerned lately about China. They are now all over Africa, buying things and investing over there and getting those countries dependent on them and supporting, non-democratic people. And I'm just
like who?
Well,
we are in a country that supports Saudi Arabia.
Yes, that's true. Right. So
sadly, we have a problem with, superpowers supporting non-democratic people.
The speaker in this clip is Greek politician Yanis Varoufakis, who brings up a great point. This American lady is concerned that China is doing business with non-democratic nations. Meanwhile, this speech has taken place in America, who has a very close relationship with non-democratic Saudi Arabia. In fact, the United States and Saudi Arabia have had a very close diplomatic relationship since 1945. The United States basically overlooks any human rights violations and state-sponsored terrorism in exchange for two things: oil, and Saudi Arabia's support on all United States foreign policy issues.
They're in Africa. They're lending money to countries to build ports and different infrastructure.
To build what?
Port.
And what's wrong with that?
And well, because
Countries that need ports get ports.
but they're making people dependent on. I mean, I know it's the same thing that we've done, which is
No, it's not.
all around the world.
They are far more humanistic than the United States ever was.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. So.
Let me give you an example. Of course, they are peddling for influence.
Yeah.
But they are non-interventionists. Absolutely non-interventionist in a way that Europeans, the West, has never managed to fathom.
And Yanis makes another great point. China is doing things very differently than both the United States and European superpowers in the past.
Because I know at the end of the day, my deal with the Chinese is to benefit Africa. And the Chinese have always been fair. Like, this big propaganda that the Chinese are trying to use it, to me, I don't see it. I've seen nothing but fair deals.
Unless you do a bad deal, of course.
I mean, unless you do a bad deal, of course. But even then, I haven't seen them take advantage. I honestly haven't. And I've been dealing with the Chinese for the last 7 years. I haven't seen them try to take advantage. You know, they come fair. Look, we'll do this for that. It's always been fair. Whereas French, they take and never give anything back. Ever. Still this day, they've been in places 300-400 years, and their place in areas in Africa has never developed not 1 inch.
Again, we see a continuous theme here. China comes in and they offer you a deal. We'll do this for that. And this has earned China a certain reputation among African countries and among African people.
China's engagement in Africa has always resulted in some productive asset or some productive sector being left, whether it's in the form of infrastructure or some kind of concrete exchange in the form of investment, whatever, that leaves visible concrete asset on the ground, especially in the productive economic sector rather than in the human development sector.
Basically, if you do a deal with China, you're going to receive a tangible asset. It could be a new rail line, a new airport, a new seaport, but you're going to be receiving something that will directly benefit the local economy.
But I was just relaying the perception in Africa that if you want concrete things, you go to China. If you want to engage in endless discussions and discourse, you go to the normal traditional donors. So I think the challenge really is on the West to prove that partnership can really yield some concrete outcomes and results.
The challenge is actually on the West to do more and to do better. And this is why we're seeing this continuous theme around the world. More countries, everybody from Indo-Pacific nations to countries in South America, Africa, all over the world are choosing to do business with China because they can see the tangible results. And we all know that China is the world's factory. And if you do business with China, you're not only are opening yourselves up to the second largest economy in the world, but you're also opening up to future world trade with many nations around the world. In closing, let's go back to Colonel Richard Black and hear his proposal for what the United States needs to do moving forward.
We need to just get away from this feeling that we have to constantly be at war with the entire world. 5,000, 6,000 miles of ocean separating us from the nearest threats that we perceive. We probably have less reason to be militaristic than any great nation on earth.
The ironic thing is that the United States government spends trillions of dollars on its military and conflicts around the world. Meanwhile, the United States is the only country in the world that cannot keep its children safe at school. This is an absolute pandemic, and violence in America is at really unprecedented levels. Honestly, America really needs to check itself, and we must ensure one of the most basic human rights in a civil society, and that is safety for citizens.